So welcome everybody to Stuttgart UX Meetup number 49. Getting very close to 50 here. This one is about building your own insights repository. And I'm joined today by Samantha Reis, Edwin Cruz, and yeah, together we're hosting the meetup. Sam is our UX researcher one of our UX researchers in the Brighton office of Brandwatch. Edwin is our local UX designer and UX researcher in Stuttgart. And I am a senior director engineering and head up the Stuttgart office here. And as such, obviously, I will always talk a little bit about Brandwatch as well, so you know what it's all about. I'll keep it short today because the whole presentation in a way will be about Brandwatch. So what is Brandwatch? Brandwatch operates in the space of digital consumer intelligence. And that basically means that we've got a host of digital products and services, web applications, which basically let you find out what billions of consumers think about you, your products, and your competitors. And then lets you make the best decisions for your business based on that data that we provide and that you can access yourself. Brandwatch is also a company of 550 people globally and 20 here in Stuttgart. That's a picture of the Stuttgart team. And before we dive into tonight's topic, as always, I want to ask you ask you if you have any topic to contribute to one of our next meetups. Please let us know. You can do this here in the Zoom chat, on the Meetup webpage, by email, Twitter, whatever. And also don't be afraid to suggest something again that you might have suggested while talking to us at one of the previous meetups or so. We might not be organized enough to always remember that. So please keep it coming. And what's actually exciting, I just found out today from Edwin, is that he might be co-hosting or organizing another one together with one of our engineers about teaching designers how to code. So I think that could be really interesting for quite a few here in our UX community. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, just the agenda. So I'll hand over in a second to Sam and Edwin. Then we'll have around 7:30, we'll have a Q&A session. There, I think what worked really well last time is if you've got questions, if you can pop them into the chat, into the Zoom chat feature. You'll, whoever hasn't seen it, there is a chat feature at the bottom. Then I can ask those questions to Sam and Edwin, and we'll go through them like that. And then, depending on how many people we are at the end, we'd like to try out the socializing that or networking that we've been doing before as well via the Zoom breakout rooms feature rather. So we'll split each other into various kind of separate video chats and then kind of cycle through. And it might be a bit bumpy at the beginning because it's the first time we try out this feature, but I hope it will be great for having a chat where there's not 20 or 50 or 100 people talking over each other. So I think that's it from my side. Edwin, is there anything I forgot kind of intro-wise? Otherwise, I'll just hand over to Sam and Edwin.
Cool. I think that's it. And I guess keep an eye on the waiting room just in case anybody pops in.
I shall do that.
Awesome.
So I'll share my screen. Hopefully this will work. So can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, sweet. All right, so hello everybody. My name is Samantha Reis and I'm one of the UX researchers at Brandwatch.
And I'm Edwin Cruz and I'm a UX designer and also sometimes researcher. And we work together.
Work together.
We practice that so much.
Yeah, hopefully you could hear us simultaneously. Right.
Cool, let's go to the next slide. Can you hit next?
Can you see it? It's on the next one now.
There we go. Yeah, I thought I could give you a little bit of an intro about our team, because then you know where we're coming from when we, when we might suggest a solution that worked for us and how you could replicate it. I think it's important to point out why it worked for us and in what context this solution is actually working. So our team is distributed. So we have people in London. We also have people in London, but our designers are in Brighton, Stuttgart, and Berlin. So we are a distributed team of, I would say, about 20 people. And next slide.
Did it work?
Nope, there we go. And for instance, Sam and I work together very often, but we live pretty far away. So in this context is in which we work with research, and everything we present here is going to be seen through that. It's going to be colored by that situation that we have. So next slide. So we're here to talk about how to build an instance repository, but before we do that, I thought it would be interesting to tell you a brief story about the life of a UX research project at Brandwatch, just to show you what the status quo was before we began this, this project. Let's go. So usually the way a research project begins is we get a request, and typically the request comes from a project manager, although it can also come from a fellow designer. And then after that, next slide. So the research team or the assigned researcher is going to help the project manager have a look at the information they want to gather, try to understand why they want to gather it, also understand what are the external influences that prompt this study. That could be anything from deadlines or requests from a particular client, etc. And then we try to help them find the most unbiased way to gather that information. So then what happens if everything goes smoothly in that kickoff meeting, then the team runs the study. And that could mean a variety of things. It could mean we visit our clients, or we run a usability study remotely, or we do a couple of interviews over Zoom, or we run a survey. There's a lot of things depending on what the need is. And then after that, what typically happened would be to analyze the results, very like designery-esque on a wall full of Post-its, just a bunch of trees on the wall. Cool. So fair enough. Next slide. What happens after that is, and this is probably my favorite part, probably Samantha's as well, is we gather the whole implementation team, and we have several teams. So depending on who's working on what, these meetings can actually include up to 20 people, where we present the results and we make some suggestions for further steps. And that's more or less what a typical project looks for us in research. But there are some additional steps, which is once you're done with your project, you dump all of it in G Drive and you never see it again. That marks the end. And like I said, that's an average process. It's not always like that, but I would say it's often like that. Works most of the time, but there's obviously a few problems, which Samantha will talk about.
Yeah, so I'll be now highlighting the pain points we experience along the research process we go through. And to start with that, typically when people or product managers or colleagues come to ask us if we have any information about X project or X use case, it could be somebody just being curious about something we've done in the past. And this happens often, that product managers will come to us with a question like this. It's kind of hard for us to just know off the top of our heads, because we frequently run projects, and we might be running 2 projects every 3 weeks or so. So there's a lot of information. And if we don't really look closely, it's just hard to tell quickly to somebody whether we actually have run a project like that, or if we have a very specific insight that they're looking for. So we typically don't know if we know, so if we have an answer to their questions. Another pain point is that when we're running a research project, we typically come across tangential insights, we call it. So let's say we're researching a specific workflow, but we actually started discovering a lot of information related to our help center. Where do we record this? Where do we put it? What do we do with it? Also, like how to look for this stuff if you don't really know if a specific thing that you're interested in is related to a project, and all things that we have, all the information we have organized in the Google Drive is categorized per project. It's also really hard to look for these individual pieces of insights. So it's almost like the feeling you get when you're kind of cleaning up your house and putting everything in order, and you hide something so well that then you don't know where you put it when you actually need it. This is one of the pain points we experience. And here we have this quote, one of my favorite quotes in Spanish, which I think in English is "Good things come to people who wait," or something like that. Lo bueno se hace esperar. And this is just to highlight the length that can come together with the data analysis part of the process. So especially transcribing interviews or any type of methodology we've done, the methods themselves can be lengthy, but the turning that information into something digital that you can work with typically passes through a lot of post-it notes, which, not to mention, is not very environmentally friendly. And also the data analysis part of the process, particularly for me, can become really lonely. If there are any researchers listening, you might also experience this, but if you don't really have like collaborative tools, or if you're in a team like Edwin and I are, where we're not in the same physical location, then this can become quite isolating. Also because you kind of, to analyze data, you need to be alone thinking by yourself, which is fair enough, but yeah, this is also a pain point sometimes. So when we are not in the office, we kind of take all the context away with us. So if I go on holiday and I've just presented a week ago all the findings for a project I've been working for a month, for example, but somebody next week needs to know a little detail about what I presented and I'm not there, then like where can our users or our audience find this information? And if you think about it, I don't think anybody really wants to watch a recording of a Zoom call or a presentation. I personally think I have never done this in my life. So if I wasn't there physically, it's kind of not really in my interest to listen to other people's discussion. So this is something hard that it's sometimes also not depending on us not being in the office, but what if we couldn't schedule the meeting when everybody in the team was there? And another point could be, what if the researcher leaves Brandwatch? So will they literally just take all of the context away with them in their head? And then ultimately, the Google Drive is where our data dies. So it's like a data cemetery. And that's the last pain point that I will highlight, passing this on to Edwin again. You're muted.
Yeah, oh. Thank you, Sam. Right. So these are our pain points. And obviously, we've had that for a number of years. And with sometimes you become numb to the pain. But luckily, our manager, Evie, the head of research, she was on maternity leave. And when she came back, I think she really brought a really fresh perspective into the whole situation. And she really questioned whether this should be like this, and whether there's something we can do about it. I personally started learning about atomic research. And I don't know for a fact how long this has been around. I know I read about it for the first time about maybe 1 year ago. On a Medium post by Tomer Sharon. And atomic research, as he defines it, or I suppose the one takeaway that I got from that whole article was that instead of reports or slide decks or dashboards, the most usable unit of research is the insight, or in other words, a nugget, which is what he calls this smallest unit of research. And as you can see, when you have a report, when you have a slide deck presentation, you're lumping together a lot of information. And so you're like spreading this information, or rather like hiding it inside big documents. And so when someone asks you for information and you hand them a full document full with a bunch of findings, it's just not it's not a friendly experience. Maybe the one piece of information people wanted is on page 7, third paragraph, and you're forcing them to like scan all that information. The other problem with this could be that, well, maybe they found that piece of information they were looking in that specific place. Maybe some of the context is lost elsewhere in the document. And so you're forcing people to read the whole presentation to take away the one piece of information that we're looking for. So atomic research, if we go to the next slide, it's actually really similar to a concept that maybe a lot of designers here are familiar with, which is atomic design. So this was also a big trend on which a lot of design systems are based. And it says that you pretty much split your problem into several components that are reusable. And so this I believe, well, I read it first from Brad Frost, and he was explaining it in terms of you have atoms, molecules, organisms, and then after that he breaks the biology analogy and he starts talking about templates and pages. But basically an atom could be something like a brand color or a typography, and a molecule could be two pieces of two atoms together. So maybe type in a background making a button, and then you can have an organism like a nap bar, and so on. So atomic research, I think, is just catching up with what UI design did a long time ago, which is basically just break down the problem into usable parts. Let's go to the next slide. So for us, I don't think this is like clearly defined. And if you look at any articles on the internet or any literature on this, there's a lot of ways to do it. So we definitely had to come up with a way that worked for us. So we decided to break our research into evidence, observations, and insights. We did a bunch of research for this. A lot of it draws inspiration from Thomas Sharon's Polaris system, which is something he developed while working at WeWork. And basically, what we have here is at the left hand of your screen, you have evidence and experiments. And this are manifest in the form of a video or a transcript that comes directly from the user. So these are like just the raw, recordings and transcripts that you take when you talk to people about the experiences that they have with your product or service. And from there, as a researcher or a sense maker, you're reading this information and you're turning it into observations, which are like a lot friendlier to interpret when you're doing, for instance, affinity maps and things like that. So, you take a quote from a user, and if you ever have read a transcript from a user, it's going to be just like full of noise with like us and like and like people like backtracking, correcting themselves, and then saying another sentence. And so parsing this into just like nice little notes is really helpful. And that is, I suppose, like the first step into this process. So you take that raw evidence and you always link it together. And then you put your interpretation on it, which should be at this point pretty neutral and as objective as possible. There's always going to be a bit of your own interpretation, of course. But at this point in the nugget or observation, you try to keep it as objective as possible. And then you take many nuggets or many observations and you put them together to create insights. So I really like the example that Tomer uses in Airtable. So there's an Airtable where this is demoed. And I really like how he's using as an example, like, I think it's as if WeWork opened an office in Mars or something. And so he's talking about the problems that inhabitants of Mars might have. So it's just like a fictional way to show how you could use this system. But basically, you extract that information and then you start combining it together to create insights. And we can break down nuggets, observations, and insights further. So let's go to the next slide. And that is basically like the whole point of this is atomic research says the nugget of the observation is the smallest usable unit of research. And so you put a lot of work into this. You enrich that data, that observation, with several parameters. And what parameters might work for you could be different than the parameters that work for us. In our case, you know, for instance, we use location. And location for us might mean somewhere in the platform. So a particular screen where, you know, an observation was made. We also add the project. So obviously, this is probably research commissioned by someone, as we mentioned before. So we add the name of the project. We also add the name of the observer. In this case, for instance, Sam was the person who made that observation. And then we get into a really interesting part of the metadata that we add, in which we're trying to quantify qualitative data. And I think this is one of my favorite parts of the whole system, because it really forces us to be better interviewers. When we're like transcribing all these things, and we cannot find information to fill these fields, then we know that we didn't push enough for a real insight. So for instance, if somebody expresses a problem during an interview, you definitely want to know how often this happens. So, you know, somebody might say like, oh, like this is the most horrible thing that happens. So in essence, you have a negative experience, but it's very important to know if this is a thing that happened once, if it is a thing that happened a couple times, if it is a thing that happens constantly. And then you also want to, like I said, you want to measure the intensity of that experience. And that can be a little bit subjective. So here you just have to like exercise some caution and creative license. Hopefully you're well aligned with your team. And then next, you rate the experience. So we use basically negative, neutral, positive. And this is always related to, you know, since we're rating, we're always looking for experiences. So we're always looking for stories that people tell us. And then we're trying to say, okay, was this experience positive or negative in relationship to our brand? So does the person have now a positive association to our product and brand because of the experience, or a negative one, or maybe a neutral? So the other thing that we do is we timestamp our findings. And this is really important. And what is also important is not that you use the timestamp from the time of the interview, but rather that you use the timestamp from when this story happened. So it could be that in the same interview, you have several timestamps. So somebody could be telling you a story about, oh, you know, I had some problems logging in. And then that for us is a cue to dig deeper. So I'm like, okay, so when did this happen? Then I might say, oh, like 4 months ago. So that allows you to like separate and classify every story that the user might tell you or demonstrate for you in an interview. And like I said, it also allows you to add some quantification to your qualitative data. So this is the observation. This is the nugget. And now we want to create insights with this. Now you notice here that in the observer field, I have Sam. But in the insight, my name's in there. So the person who made the observation doesn't necessarily have to be the person who made the insight. And that is the beauty of the system, is that this is a modular system that you can then give to somebody else. And we do a lot of peer review. So when Sam finishes some research, she might tell me or another one of our colleagues, hey, can you read this and make sure that it makes sense, that it stands on its own? And that way we keep good quality control. And make sure that if somebody else jumps into the project who was not part of the project, this person will be able to also understand and have enough context to interpret every single observation. So with that in mind, then I can take observations made by another colleague and combine them together with other existing observations or new insights that maybe I came up in a new study, and I can create insights. So an insight can have one or many observations. And these are always connected. We'll show you in a little bit how that looks actually in the platform. But if you imagine this as like, I don't know, something in a database, then our insights always have a link to all of the observations that we have. And they're also linked to the evidence. So ideally, you also want always to back up everything that you claim in your observations with actual evidence. So every single observation is directly connected to a piece of evidence, which might be something like a 30-second video or a transcript. So I think all of this process, by the way, took some effort and quite a bit of research. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and I think like we can speak about this process geographically, but we can also talk about it a little bit chronologically. So it was really cool. The first meeting we had, Samantha and I, in Brighton to talk about this problem. We set up like maybe like 2 half-day sessions where we really try to define a common language. And I think that was absolutely crucial. You would be surprised if you talk to anyone in your team to define something as simple as problem. You know, what do you define as a problem? What do you define as an insight? What is an observation? What is evidence? What is a user goal? These are like absolute like basic, you know, elements to any argument that you might do in research. And I was very surprised that I just assumed we were aligned and we were not at all. Mm-hmm. And this was really useful. So, I mean, we did a bunch of research. It's amazing like how complex such a simple thing can be. So, you know, for instance, when we do research and we say there is a problem, we're talking about 2 things specifically. And I think by now, a lot of the people in our implementation team are also aware of this. When we say there is a problem, we're saying there is a particular user who cares about solving something. So, because sometimes what we find is that people complain about stuff, but when you press them for details, it'll come out that there is not really a problem. So they're like, oh, well, actually, it annoys me a little bit, but it's fine. And this was also like very helpful to then, you know, present our findings with a lot more confidence. So it's not just what people say, right? If we don't have evidence to back it up and say like this person actually really cares about this problem, then we might as well just skip it and keep it at that, or like just express that as an opinion from a user. And an opinion is really useful for a marketing team, but we try to base all of our changes and design decisions on behavior, which is very different to opinions. So we did that first in Brighton while I was visiting. Then I came back to Stuttgart and I ran a usability test, trying to use that framework that we created. And I thought it went pretty well. I thought it went really, really well. So then we met in Berlin. So Samantha traveled to Berlin, I traveled to Berlin. And she was working on a contextual inquiry. And then we tried to apply the same system. And it worked really well as well. And that's when, we had to fine tune a few things, but I think at that point we realized like, okay, I think if we can have 2 researchers who can use the same framework for 2 very different kinds of studies, a usability test and a contextual inquiry, then I think we have something that might work for our company. And I can show you the very early prototype and how that looked. So let's go to the next slide. I apologize for blurring all this out, but IT said we're not allowed to show anything. But this was literally a spreadsheet. I'm also very happy to maybe share a template, you know, in the coming days. It's very simple. So in this very first left-hand column, we have the actual observation. So this is our interpretation of what happened after reading a user transcript. Then we rate the experience into positive, negative, or neutral. Then we then like say how intense we think this is. Is this a really big problem? And I guess it also helps to define how you rate that intensity. So for us, something that is, you know, high means that if people like go through this experience, it might risk a relationship with them. So they might, you know, cancel the service or decide to like not continue using our app. Then, you know, like something medium is something that is really annoying, but maybe they have no other option. And something low is just a minor inconvenience that, you know, they're annoyed about, but maybe they're not going to like cancel the service because of that. And then we also rate how often this happens. And I cannot tell you how useful this is for when you like bring a bunch of, you know, like user pains and issues to the implementation team and you discuss them, it's no longer your opinion or the opinion of the PM or the opinion of the tech lead to say, this is more important than this. It's like you actually have some evidence and some quantification to say, well, actually, we see 5 users having this intense problem very frequently. So even though it's not the easiest thing to solve, it's probably the first thing we should solve. And then across the rest of the columns, we have other headers like emotions, which, to be honest, I don't think have worked very well.
No.
For one, we don't really use them. I think like those first 3 are more than enough. What is somewhat useful is saying when possible where in the platform this happened, and obviously because we have a very like virtual sort of platform, this is very easy. We can just say like, okay, so this happened in the login page, or this happened in the query writing page, this happened in the dashboard, etc. And that also really helps for later. Yes, so I suppose the next thing was, so we did this. This was a prototype, Samantha's and my prototype, and how we were going to do this. And in parallel, if you go to the next slide, in parallel, we have an amazing research operations team, and they're such a lifesaver. I remember when we had to recruit ourselves. It was
Oh my God.
It was such a pain. But we have like a couple of really, really wonderful, really effective, charismatic research operation people who reach out to our customers and you know, do everything they can to make sure we have participants for our studies, as long as we provide a good description of the profile we're looking for. They also took it upon themselves to research all the available tools. So, you know, we researched many more, but the top 4 for us were Dovetail, Enjoy HQ, Aurelius, and Airtable. And we ended up choosing Enjoy HQ. So let's go to the next slide. To be honest, it was very much, we were undecided between Dovetail and Enjoy HQ. And to be absolutely honest, the reason we chose Enjoy is because they have a really good customer service. So whereas the guys in Dovetail, they're in Australia. And I remember we called them and we said, hey, can you just give us a demo of this? And they asked like, oh, where are you guys located? And when we said we're in Europe, they said, sorry, no, we don't have anyone who can meet you. Sorry, here's a video. And the guys from Enjoy were like on it. So they made a really good pitch and we used their product. So the next thing, right. So this is really interesting because we have a similar story at our company already. And I guess like we use this, when we presented this to our team, it made a lot of sense. But for everybody who doesn't know what Axiom is our design system. And Axiom also went through a period where it had to prove its value, right? So there was a time in our company where, I mean, we do everything with Axiom now, and I also don't know how I would do my prototypes if it wasn't for Axiom. It's so easy, you know, like we have a bunch of really talented UI designers who sweat the details on this, and then, you know, we as UX designers and prototypers can take those building blocks and build amazing things really, really quickly. But the benefits of Axiom as a design system were not very clear in the beginning. And the investment had to grow gradually. So in the beginning, there was one developer who spent maybe 20% of his time working on Axiom. And now it has actually grown into a full team at Brandwatch. And so I thought it was like really relatable. It's like, okay, we're trying this thing out. We don't have a lot of budget. People are not paying attention. But we really think that one day our instance repository will be as important as Axiom. Let's go to the next slide. So on the left, you can see what Axiom looks like. So, you know, typical, I suppose, design system. Not typical because it's ours and it's really good and it does its job amazingly. And on the right, you can actually see a blurred screenshot of what I can show you is our insights repository. So there you can see a bunch of stories, some written by Sam, some written by me. And it's just showing you, like I said, that atomic unit of research that we can share and look for, all of them fully tagged, full of context, have a bunch of pretty pictures, and in a searchable database. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, just like with the science systems, our ultimate goal here is to break the monolith. So we want to like turn our work into modules that are easily transferable and that other people can reuse. So like I said, if Sam finds something out in a research project, and maybe a month later, I'm researching something else, and I can look up our tag system, and I see that it's something that would actually help my argument or my insight, then I can also reuse it. So this really gives life to all the research that you've done, and instead of like being a one-time thing. I mean, research is super expensive, right? We spend so much time doing it. It's such a pain to like arrange meeting with clients and doing all these things. And it's such a shame if you cannot reuse, like that, amazing insights and things that are actually really valuable. And that, by the way, might be valuable to the people who saw the presentation first, but maybe it wasn't relevant for everyone at the moment. So this really breaking this monolith of the research report gives access to everyone and makes the work more manageable and also reusable. Let's go to the next slide. So this is what I mean by breaking the monolith. So each one of these insights is actually backed up by a bunch of stories. So, or not stories, sorry, nuggets. So all of these are small observations, all of them related to a video or a transcript, and they're all combined in one insight that you see on the right. Cool, let's go to the next one. Also, something that is really beneficial of this whole thing is, we let the computer do the boring things, and we can focus on, the fun stuff, which is making connections in the data. So one of the big benefits of using this research repository is actually the ability to get full transcripts from videos or recordings. So we upload a video, it goes pretty fast, and then we get a full transcript of the video. I would say it's about 80% accurate. You still have to like go through the video and maybe make a few corrections here and there. But overall, not horrible. As you can see here, this is highlight. So this is the video. That is the transcript below generated from the video. And then I can go ahead and highlight a particular area that I'm interested in. And then I can enrich it with the data that we talked about. So this is full of tags, comments, and sentiment data. Might be connected to other insights. And then it becomes like a standalone piece of information that we can later reuse. And the other thing that we're able to do, as I mentioned, is establish quality standards. And that is very much in line with what we do with our design system. When we think about the design system, we have a group of developers and designers who get together. Every time they feel like there's a need for a new component, it goes through a peer review. It goes through a process where, so not everything makes it to the design system. And in the same way, not everything makes it to our insights repository. So like I said, as a team, we try and curate and we try to make sure that the quality of the writing and the context is really good. And this allows us to do some really cool things, such as what I'm going to show you in the next slide. When we have everything tagged and it makes sense, we can start breaking down the data. So this, for instance, are like all the emerging themes in the platform. And the cool thing is that you can go in each one of those themes and you can break it down by sentiment, or you can break it down by screen, or you can break it down by user type. And we find having that, that power to pivot between different dimensions in the data to be a really, really big benefit. So now, so this is what we've done. This is how we use it. And maybe Samantha can now tell you how, a news story about UX research at Brandwatch.
Yeah, so we can now rewind to how we started this presentation. But we'll share again how things happen currently and from now on, hopefully. So a request is made, right, from product managers or anybody else in the company. And we query the existing research that we have. So it's simply, searching our insights repository because everything's already been tagged. And by we, I mean that we also includes everybody else. So product managers can go in and do this themselves without having to come through us. So we don't really even have to do the search for them. If necessary, we help them plan the research, and if necessary, is there because maybe the answers to their questions are already there. We might already have answered the questions in the past through another research project. So we might not need to do what the research that they're requesting at the moment. But if we do, then we help them plan the research project. And a really neat functionality of Enjoy HQ is that you can actually start, excuse me. So you use separate everything per project, and then you can start your documentation with a plan. So you can work with your product manager or whoever's involved inside of Enjoy HQ and even give more context to your insights in the future by keeping the plan attached to your documents and your analysis. So this is really good for consistency and for visibility for anyone who's coming into the tool. And again, it keeps everything really contextual. So everything's just linked to the same project. Then again, if necessary, we run the study, we collect our data and come back to Enjoy HQ. And then we analyze the results digitally. So the best thing here really is that there's no more hours and hours of transcribing interviews or contextual inquiries. I mean, a contextual inquiry can typically take like around 3 hours. And if you're lucky to be able to record that, then you're unlucky to have to transcribe it yourself. So this doesn't happen anymore, and it's really great. It gives us back a lot of our time. And it's a lot easier to get to the insights with the help of the machine, pointing out those the patterns that may be arising from themes if you've done the tagging and labeling of each document properly. So I think one thing really that I've enjoyed from this process is the fact that using this atomic research process, I would say, has really encouraged us to think properly about what it is that we're writing, what it is that we're producing for product managers. So it's less about what the person said, and it's more about what this actually really means for us, what this really means for the project. So having to think in a different way in order to use Enjoy HQ as we're doing with atomic research has been super, I personally has been enjoyable. And also I feel like we're wasting a lot less post-its, because before, and this is also really great because we're remote and we're not in the same location. We can now collaborate a lot more in our analysis, and what I was mentioning before of analysis being a really lonely part of the research process is really not happening anymore. I don't know if this has been triggered because of coronavirus and everybody being stuck at home, but I feel like Enjoy HQ has also played a big role in this. And then we present the results in digestible stories, the ones that Edwin was mentioning before, to anyone who's interested. So a really neat thing about the stories themselves, so the actual insight, the individual item, so the atom, I would say, is that when you present your stories, there's a collapsing functionality. So if you're sharing this with a team where there's, for example, 1 product manager and 2 designers and then 7 developers, maybe the product manager is going to want to know a lot more information and detail on what actually that insight is, where it's coming from, what the evidence is, what's your observation before it turns into an insight. But maybe the 2 of the developers that are lacking a little bit of time, they don't want to go that deep into the data, and they just want to see a summary. So this is a really nice way of you kind of tailoring your insights to all the different needs of the team. And again, it's really important to highlight that this is all in context of the project. So anyone who just drops in, maybe there's somebody new in the project that's simply joining last minute, they can come in here and get a clear understanding of what's being presented. And then finally, we discuss the results, so that now we're kind of moving away from like doing this massive presentation to everybody that in one go. and recording the session and then sharing that recording if anybody missed it. And we now, well, I've actually opted for using Loom videos. So based on the insights that I've produced, I go ahead and I kind of write a nice story, or it doesn't necessarily have to be written, but you're just producing the findings in a way that's really easy to explain to your audience. And then we share this video with the team that we're doing the research for. And then we can go and have a meeting where I'm not necessarily presenting everything because they've already watched the presentation. And then we have a discussion about the insights, about how we got there. If there's any details that somebody missed or didn't understand, then we can have an informed conversation or discussion, as opposed to them kind of sitting there and listening to, after 2 months of research, this is what we found. And typically when you do a presentation like that, maybe this has happened to you before, you have in your mind all the findings and the answers to your initial research questions, but stakeholders can be so eager and to understand what's happened in this time, and they have their own questions and their own assumptions, that this discussion can kind of spark whenever a very small detail is presented, and then the conversation and your whole presentation can be derailed in a different direction. So it's not to say that you kind of want to control how the presentation goes, but you might know that, if you hold on a minute, I'm going to get to that point, 1 second, but the discussion starts. And then I guess doing this, like having an evergreen insight that you can, by the way, also attach to your stories in your insights repository. So you can attach any videos that you've recorded to your project. It helps this kind of land and be understood more clearly and easily. So to reiterate the importance of having a research and insights repository, back when we were asked, when people come to ask us, do you have any information on blah? Well, we can check that for you, or you can check that yourself. Where do we put this? So tangential insights, the pain point that I was referring to at the beginning. You can even, like, if we get a piece of feedback from a customer success manager, from a client that just gave us a piece of feedback, and we're actually not even running a study on that specific point, we can just go in EnjoyHQ and create a single document, but then give it its proper tags and labels and properties, for it to live individually in the insights repository, but it will be relevant to whoever runs a search in the future. So it doesn't have to belong to a project per se, but we still have a place where to put all this, all the tangential insights that arise. Like Edwin said, we let the machine do all the boring work, and we can actually focus on interesting things as opposed to transcribing information or audios. And then, when we're not in the office, this is great because there's not a problem anymore. You can go and enjoy your holidays because all the information is there. It's not in your head. So I feel like I need to do like a commercial voice in the Insights repository where all happy insights live. And I'll close by giving the word again to Edwin.
Next one. Thanks, Sam. So I think, like I said, I think in the intro, it solves some of our problems, but obviously has created new problems. So we're in the process of figuring everything out. So some of the things that we're still trying to figure out is who's allowed to write insights. Sam mentioned that, we let, product managers can log in and look at things. But we're really wondering, should they be able to write insights? And this is also a discussion point that our head of UI brought up when Axiom was created. Just because you have a bunch of really good components doesn't mean that, people who might not have a specific type of training are able to put it together in a cohesive, product or presentation or composition. And I think the same goes for an insights repository. Just because you can grab a couple of things and put them together doesn't mean, again, if you don't understand, for instance, the difference between an opinion and a behavior, there's a risk that this information could be misused, and that is very dangerous. So we are struggling with the question of who's actually allowed to write insights. we're also wondering who's allowed to see the raw evidence for the same reasons. So like I said, the level of the unit of research that we share is the observation. And that is typically connected to raw data, but then there's also a bunch of other raw data that we deem not relevant or misinformation. And there's also a question of like, should everyone be able to see that? There's also legal concerns about that. We have to keep this in a very secure database, and our security team is, like very on it, let's say. And then it feels like, well, is gatekeeping okay? Should the research team say sorry, or the design team say sorry, like you cannot edit this, or you cannot make your own insights. You need to come through us. Those are questions we're actually trying to figure out. We don't know the answers. And another really interesting one as well, it's a little bit contradicting to the last slide where we said, where happy insights live forever, or something to those lines. We're actually wondering now, what is the expiration date on the nuggets? So if we run a usability test on a feature that is no longer current, I guess it's pretty obvious that probably should go away. But there are some other insights that are not so obvious. We haven't reached that point yet. We've been working with this, I think, for about maybe 6 months or so, maybe a little bit more. So we haven't reached that point yet where we think, there's a bunch of stuff that expired and needs to be cleaned up. And also, by the way, we're also wondering, is this tool the one we need? I think the short answer to that is the tool we have, and it's doing okay for now. But we could definitely, see oh, there's so many ways that this is I really like what Jesse, one of our colleagues, said. It's very opinionated. So it kind of forces a structure onto you. And we've had to work around some of those limitations. So we're also wondering, and also after doing a bunch of reading from other people who try to do the same, they end up, I think the conclusion of 2 of those articles, so 2 out of 2 articles that I read about Insights Repository, end with the conclusion that you should create your own tool to fit your own needs. Who knows, maybe by the time we prove this has a lot of value, we can also get a couple of devs to do it. That would be awesome. So yeah, this is not perfect, solves a lot of our pain points, but it creates new ones, and it doesn't solve all of them. But I think all in all, it's a really, really great improvement to the way that we do research at Brandwatch.
Yes.
Nice. So now you know. Cool.
Cool.
Questions?
Thank you very much, Edwin and Samantha. I guess before we jump into questions, I just want to say a fantastic presentation. I really like the slides as well, so I'm going to change my background now. Because it also says discussion, so it nicely fits with questions. Before we jump into questions, whoever feels comfortable, I think would be cool if you can switch on your video, so it feels a bit more like a discussion, and also put your hands together actually for a big round of applause for the 2.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You can emoji clap as well if we. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.
So, we've got a few more faces. Fantastic. So I see there's a few questions in the chat. I'd like to take the occasion, because I can, to ask the first question, just a really short one. I heard you talk about nuggets and stories and atoms, and I guess that all of these are kind of synonymous. Is that right, or did I get that wrong? Just
yeah, so I'll take that one, if that's okay, Sam.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think part of it was just talking about atomic design, and then just using that as a segue to say this is heavily inspired in this way of thinking about UI components. So I think one of the slides mentioned we use observation or nugget. Then the next one is insight. And before that, there's evidence. So those are the 3 terms that we use. There's a lot of different ways to call it, by the way. We got into I mean, like a long debate in our team about how to call those things. So yeah, that definitely happened.
But in Enjoy HQ, just so you know, the equivalent to a atom, I would say, is a document, and then a couple of documents together turn into a story, right?
Yeah. So that's also worth pointing out is Enjoy HQ does not agree with our terminology.
Yeah. So
so not
I
great.
had a feeling when you two were talking, like sometimes you also use story. Cool. I'll go to the questions in the chat now. And you can hear my son in the background as a bonus. So, project. What is the typical size and how many insights are created?
I saw that question while Sam was presenting. I looked it up, and I see it depends on the number of interviews, obviously, and what activities. But I'm seeing one project with 5 customer interviews, and I'm seeing 26 highlights. Yeah. Okay. So 26. 26 of those. What do you call it? Observations. And actually, it would be interesting how many actual insights we got from that. Mm-hmm. If you give me a couple of minutes, I can actually get that data.
I think it really depends. It really, really depends. Because like you could have, for methodology, you could have a contextual inquiry, like I said, which I was working on in February. And I did 3 or 4 contextual inquiries, and each contextual inquiry lasted like 3 hours. So you can obviously get a lot of information from that. And if you compare that to a usability test, you might get your answers in like 30 minutes. Then you might end up with like 2 insights out of like 2 really key insights out of a usability test. But at the same time, this all will vary based on the way in which you build your insights. So you could have 1 insight, so 1 story made up of like 20 observations. And then for the contextual inquiry, but then in the usability test, you might come up with 1 story based on 2 observations. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it will depend on like how, like what your observations are about and how you work with them to form your insight. I hope that makes sense.
So I think it makes sense. The answer is it depends.
Yeah.
For this one project, I see 10 insights out of those 20 something observations I mentioned.
And so by project, we mean like a research
study,
but like 1 contextual inquiry would be 1 project, or is it?
No.
No.
Yeah. So for let's say for this project that I was working on, I had 4 contextual inquiries. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the project actually that is one of the terms that actually is equivalent to reality. So the project is a research project.
Yeah. So it could be quite a big, lasting thing for over several weeks or months. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or like some problem that we want to solve or a feature we want to build or something.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. I think it's also like Gerard, did all that make sense? It's also fine if you jump in, otherwise, and unmute.
Absolutely, it makes sense. I think I just started the wrong question.
There's no wrong questions here. So and then you also asked the question: are you using personas? If so, do you relate insights to personas? Over to one of you.
Do you want to answer that one, Sam?
Well, yes. My easy answer is no. We don't use personas, but I've had a really good experience because of this, like. Renovation of the way that we come to our insights, like through atomic research. And I don't know where you got this from, Edwin. I don't know if you actually learned how to do this from like practicing this atomic research thing or process. But when we were in Berlin together, what Edwin would do would be we were trying to like put the data that I had into Enjoy HQ, and he kept on asking me to describe what the user was like just like as a conversation, like we're just friends talking about this guy who I interviewed. So he was like, tell me about this user, you know, what's he like, what's his interest, what's he trying to do with his at his job, what's his goal, you know. So I started using all these different analogies or like just from the vibe that I got off him, how I would describe this user. And then this kind of more human idea of who this person is helped me so much more make sense of why he was doing the things that he was doing, why he was struggling with the problems that he faces in his job. So I don't know if that counts as a persona, but this is something that I now do for every single session. I try to come up with like a one line of who this person is, what are they like, what they want to do.
Yeah.
What do you think, Edwin?
Yeah, no, I would agree. It's funny because, yeah, like you said, somehow I think in our design team, personas are almost taboo. Like, I think a lot of our colleagues have had really bad experience with them. We try to not do like personas in the sense of 24-year-old, like living in this country. So no demographic data, but rather more behavioral kind of profiles. So, the kind of stuff we talk about is like, okay, so this person really cares about, I don't know, presenting a solution to a client, whereas this other person cares more about, doing a project for him or herself. So I think we don't try to use personas like the classic ones, but we try to like just really, really focus on the behavioral patterns that we see.
Okay, cool. I think that answered that. And as you said, Sam, it's all we noted down, so we kind of related to the insights to have that extra context of like understanding a bit where that person is and was at the same time. Next question is, how do you refer to a specific insight or nugget when talking about it? Do they have names or IDs?
Can I begin that one, and then you can finish it, Sam? Because I think I just say really quickly, we really sweat the title that we give the nugget, and we've actually tried to come up with some kind of like Mad Libs, like fill in the blank sort of thing. So when we do an insight, we really try to make it about a problem, because that's something that is actionable, and that is something that the team can actually turn into a solution. And so when we put together something, we try to give it like all those elements. Like, it's got to be about someone who cares about a problem. So I guess that maybe counts as a name. So it might say something like, oh, like the lack of this, it's a major blocker to achieve that for this type of person. So it doesn't have like a code name or like a nickname, but it has a very succinct title, I would say.
I think, yeah, the title is it also helps you kind of understand really well what you're trying to present. So it's like basically you're kind of summarizing all of the nuggets that you have. So I'm talking about a story here. So this is where the terms get all confusing. But so you have your insight that is made up of your observations, right? So that insight, I would call it as like, this is the title of the insight. But then I've lately been going like one step beyond and giving it another name. So let's say I have this insight that refers to a particular behavior, and I have 10 observations under it. And this behavior is related to a problem caused by a bug in our system. So then now that I want to share this with the team, I create on Slack, I've been using like 3, like I'll just say something really enticing, like how this bug is upsetting all our users, something like that. I don't know, I can't come up with anything now, but you give it like a really nice name that people want to click on. Mm-hmm. And then I add this, I just link the whole insight with all the observations to this one, really attractive, hyperlink on Slack. And then that takes them to so as soon as you see like, oh my God, what if a product manager sees that, they're like, oh, I want to see what this is. So this takes them to Enjoy HQ, and then they have all this data that we found. So you can take it one step beyond.
So do you ever
You-
rename it, or do you say never rename it? Because sometimes when people say, we talked about a certain insight last week, I cannot find it anymore. Where is it? Maybe someone renamed the title. Or...
Well, I would say to that, the better way to find it is through the tags. So it usually, this will be related to a feature on a screen and potentially a study. So that is an easier way. So instead of seeing like 200, entries, you see 10 and you probably find the one you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think the title will always be the same in Enjoy HQ. What I'm talking about, like that you can change, is if you want to entice people to come into Enjoy HQ, then you can come up with whatever nice, attractive set of words you can find to describe your insight or to summarize it even further. But you always have the same title in Enjoy.
I think that's really cool. You've already got the notion of clickbait to get.
Yeah, I'm totally clickbaiting.
Yeah.
Of course.
into the repository.
Yeah.
I guess I'll move on to the next question, if that's okay, which is from Tanya. Which parts are more important in the end, nuggets or insights? And with which do you work more? Interesting question.
I'm looking at you, Edwin.
I'm looking at you. Okay, I can go first. I think they're somewhat equally important. But if I had to pick one to keep, then it would be the nuggets, because that's the source of your insight. So I mean, if you already have an insight, it's going to be hard to maybe you find additional evidence that supports that. But at that point, you're just validating something you found out. Whereas I think just having the ability to go through the nuggets and make up your own. Actually, let me take that back a little bit.
That's why I was asking, actually.
Yeah. So I think for somebody who's trying to make sense of it, so if you're part of the research team or the design team trying to come up with all these things, I think the nugget is the most important thing, and that's where you should spend most of your time, making sure that it's nice and well tagged. But if you are someone who's trying to take action on that information, then is the insight what's most important to you.
Yeah, I was also going to say that it's kind of it's going to be really depending on the project. So if it's really relevant to a project in particular in a specific moment in time, then maybe the insight is more relevant to you, because then it's more in context, and maybe even more how do you say this? I don't know how to explain this. More fresh. This is what I'm trying to say. It's fresher. But then the nugget is, I feel like it's also super important, because then you might come up with another project 2 months down the line where that nugget is actually really useful for you. So what Edwin is saying about the maintenance of the nugget and making sure that the nugget, I can't stop thinking about a nugget from McDonald's. But yeah, making sure that that's really clear and how do you say, objective, that will give you the capacity also in the future to use that, even though it was from another project.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's another answer. Yeah, when we can say it depends. Sorry.
Thank you. That's fine.
I guess it's actually the name nugget. If you try and not think about McDonald's, then it's a gold nugget or something. So
I think that's where it comes from, but
bias it towards this is the really valuable thing.
Yeah.
I don't see gold nuggets as often as I see chicken nuggets.
Cool.
Okay, what else?
What else? Will this meeting be recorded? Yes, it is being recorded right now. And we'll probably share it, or at least excerpts from it, and also otherwise get in touch.
Yeah, can I say we've really been trying to think carefully about how to do that, because we have 3 meetups recorded already, and we definitely want to share them. We just haven't had the time to sit down and make sure that we we're doing it right. Yeah, but yeah.
Then we've got Tim, who just had to jump off because of the kids, but really liked the presentations and got all the questions answered. I thought so as well. Like at the end, all of a sudden you had so many questions. I was worried that we wouldn't have any questions in this discussion anymore. You answered so many already. And Saskia absolutely loves personas. Alex says probably the question of personas is very project dependable. I guess I'd agree with that. And Sophie says, maybe I've missed this, but why did you decide against Dovetail and for Enjoy HQ, apart from the customer service aspect?
Sam, you go.
I actually can't remember this because I wasn't in the conversations with him. It was my brother who luckily works in our team. He's a part of the research operations. So he was the one who was like putting up with all the sales demos and stuff. But we can get back to you if you like. We have a little chart of comparison in Airtable, if I'm not mistaken. And we had like the actual like reasons why we didn't go for Dovetail. I just remember the Australia factor being quite pressing or important.
I think also the transcription capabilities from Enjoy HQ were kind of like a really good incentive to join them. So Dovetail at the time, at least, I think they just said like, oh, we'll have video transcription in 2 months. I think they still don't have video transcription.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then Gerald says, instead of the recording, can we just get the nuggets?
After the presentation.
Very
Nice.
I guess, is there actually in the repository, is there a way to expose something publicly? You know, like you can share a Google Doc with the whole world. Could you share like a project and its nuggets with the members of this meetup or something?
I would say so speaking about Enjoy HQ, right? Actually, one of our biggest pain points right now is the way that things are presented.
Yeah.
So when you export a PDF that you can actually share with other people, the format is horrible.
It's horrible. It's like it's a complete disgrace.
Yeah, I would never like share, like if I share with someone, they probably like, is this guy a designer? Like
yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, but
maybe
like,
they will have it in 2 months.
Maybe they will have it in 2 months, yeah. But there is like a way to share a public link, so which is what we could do, which we don't share with anyone other than the implementation team.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, but that's interesting. I think we've run out of questions here. I actually wrote down a few as well, so I'm going to try and ask 1 or 2. So we've got quite a few projects in our repo by the sounds of it.
That's a great, I can tell you. Hang on.
And we still have to transfer all of the ones that we had from the Google Drive, which is going to take a little while, I think.
Yeah.
You want to like have like the research of years in there basically. Or or months.
Do you want to answer?
No, sorry, you go. Sorry.
So like, I know that next week we are having a meeting, our team, just to actually go through everything that's on the Google Drive and decide which projects are worth like migrating towards Enjoy. So, you know, there will be stuff on there that's completely obsolete, simply just because of like the changes that have happened in the company. Some things will no longer be relevant, so there's no point transferring those. And also we're trying to think like from within each folder in the Google Drive, what actually needs to be, moved towards Enjoy. Maybe not everything. Maybe we could just work a little bit on maybe finding the 5 top insights for every project and then transferring it towards Enjoy in this atomic research way, as opposed to like dumping all the sessions and the presentations. Like that might be kind of defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do with the atomic research.
Okay, cool. And that my follow-on question was going to be, or is there a way to track usage actually in Enjoy HQ, so you kind of know how
Good question.
often people actually do that?
I think the only thing you can see is who read a particular story. So whenever somebody reads it or opens it, so the way that it usually works is we have unlimited read-only accounts. So we give these accounts to project managers and tech leads, and whenever they log in and read something, we can see their pretty face show up in saying like, this person read this.
Yeah, but so you can quantify that basically.
No, I don't think there's a way to actually like just pull the data and
Yeah.
make a nice chart. No, but we can see who saw what. And we get a weekly report just saying like, oh, like this one article or like this story got this many views
It's kind
on
of
an email. Yeah, but it's very basic. Yeah.
okay. Cool. Cool. I think that I just realized we're agenda-wise we're done, and also there's no new questions in the chat. So thanks once more.